You don't have a room here, so you can sleep in the lobby like a stray dog."
With a thud, my husband's luggage was dropped at my feet. I stood alone in the cold spring wind, feeling the sting of rejection. Just a week ago, when my husband suddenly suggested this family trip, my heart leapt with joy. Maybe he was finally beginning to accept me as part of the family. I put my heart into preparing for it, thinking I'd finally be acknowledged. But now I understand it all too well. With a thud, I was shoved from behind and slammed my shoulder into the column in the lobby.
"Oh, Anna, you were just standing there in the way. You should curl up in the corner like a stray."
My sister-in-law smiled cruelly, enjoying my discomfort as she looked on. Standing with my luggage, I saw my husband carrying my sister-in-law's things carefully, glancing at me with disinterest.
"Go on. Move to the far corner of the lobby. Your presence brings down our family's dignity."
With that, he walked off with his sister, shoulder to shoulder, to their rooms on the 3rd floor.
"Isn't it better than being outside in the cold? Compared to being homeless in this chill, the lobby is a luxury."
My mother-in-law passed by me, laughing loudly with that distinctive, coarse voice. They have reserved 3 rooms, deliberately excluding mine. For years, I have swallowed everything, hoping to protect the family bond. Losing my father left me craving new family ties, and so I endured every bit of cruelty, thinking it would someday make them value me. I thought that if I just worked harder, became a better wife, they might finally see me as someone important. But the ache in my shoulder was nothing compared to the turmoil within me. I stood there under the lobby's chandelier, its light reflecting in my eyes like unshed tears. My fingers gripped my phone tightly, feeling something deep inside me breaking apart. I took a deep breath, made up my mind, and slowly began dialing. My name is Anna James, 35, a full-time housewife. I married my husband Mark 3 years ago. At first, the idea of joining a new family was thrilling. Having lost my father at a young age and experienced life with just my mother, I had always treasured the concept of family bonds. Since my 20s, I had invested in stocks, building up around $5 million in assets. I believed that personal finances were private, even between spouses, and never felt a need to share this with Mark. But in the first year of our marriage, when he came home late one night, clearly drunk, he confessed to a huge gambling debt. He was in tears, saying he couldn't pay it back on his salary alone. I was moved by his plea and thought this might be an opportunity to deepen our bond, so I told him about my assets. The very next day, he changed completely. Mark began boasting to his mother and sister about how amazing his wife was, as if my success were his own. That night's confession was the start of everything spiraling out of control. A descent I hadn't foreseen.
"Anna, I'm a bit short this month too."
Month after month, Mark would come to me asking for extra money, having already spent his entire paycheck on his own entertainment. When I hesitated, he'd turn it against me, saying,
"Oh, I get it. Someone from a poor family like me doesn't deserve anything nice."
I'd sigh and open my wallet, telling myself that we were married and money shouldn't come between us. But Mark would always spend it carelessly, without a hint of gratitude. He bought expensive golf gear, joking that he could enjoy gentlemanly hobbies thanks to me. Beneath his words, I could sense a mix of inferiority and resentment toward my financial independence.
"So you bought another game, huh? Must have been pricey."
Mark would nod proudly.
"Anna paid for it. I have such a generous wife. She's the best."
Gemma and Heather would exchange knowing glances, hinting at their jealousy and disdain toward my financial independence. Gemma lived in an apartment about a half-mile from us, and I had been quietly paying her $1,200 monthly rent without Mark's knowledge. I also covered most of her living expenses, having started the support after Mark pleaded with me.
"My mom's struggling, Anna. I can't help her, and I feel awful about it."
His words tugged at my heart, but now they were all using me.
"Anna, a new salon opened up. I'd love to go, but with the kids' school and our mortgage, I just can't afford it."
Heather was always quick to bring up money whenever she visited her mom. She resented her inability to pamper herself and took it out on me.
"Can't you help her a little, Anna? We're family after all."
Her words dripped with sarcasm as she herself leaned on me financially. To her, my wallet seemed to be the family's shared resource, and at times she made overt comments about it.
Mark is lucky to have found himself such a wealthy wife.
Her words gradually wore me down. I inherited my love of embroidery from my mother and had continued the craft. My mother taught a community embroidery class to 30 students, and we'd created many cherished memories together crafting. Our last project before she passed away was an embroidered cherry blossom piece, which I kept displayed in my study.
Embroidery, huh? That's such an old-fashioned hobby, like something a grandma would do.
Heather's words stung, but I knew her resentment was partly due to her unhappy marriage. She often used me as a target to vent her frustrations.
Anna, you'd never understand. Without kids or a job, you don't know what real struggles are. Oh, yes, Anna's so old-fashioned, right? Rich, but somehow so plain.
When the two of them were together, they would inevitably gang up on me, using every interaction as an opportunity to jab at me. Mark would always brush it off with a vague laugh. He'd grown up in a single-parent household, and I knew he'd never confront his mom. Sometimes he even joined in, laughing as his mother and sister mocked me. When we first married, I believed nurturing a strong family bond with them would be possible. I listened to Heather's complaints, and I helped Gemma financially, all with the hope of strengthening our ties. Mark, at first, was respectful of my success. Gemma was considerate, and Heather treated me like a sister. But over time, everything twisted and shifted. Mark's demands grew. Gemma's dependency deepened, and Heather's bitterness sharpened. I held on, telling myself they would one day understand and accept me.
Thank you, Anna. I'll make sure to pay this month's rent by tomorrow.
She'd say this every month, but her account was never changed. Instead, I would deposit $1,200 directly to her landlord. Without my payments, she would have lost her home.
Mom, are you sure you're handling the rent okay?
Oh, I'm managing just fine. I never wanted my son to worry about me.
I felt increasingly hollow, knowing she depended on me financially while pretending otherwise. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to tell Mark the truth. Month by month, as Mark became more oblivious to my sacrifices, I started seeing through his dependence, his mother's cunning, and his sister's malice. Embroidery became my escape, a peaceful time where I felt close to my mother again. Working on each stitch, I felt like I could talk to her spirit, even if only for a short time. But Mark, his mother, and his sister often intruded on even this small, sacred part of my life.
Anna, why don't we have some tea? Let's all spend time together as a family.
When I declined, Gemma would glare at me.
How dare you act this way? Aren't we family?
Heather would join in.
Isn't family important to you, Anna?
If I insisted on my quiet time, they would scorn me.
So your hobby is more important than family time?
Even if I turned to Mark, he'd say,
Why can't you just get along with my mom and sister?
Slowly, the joy I once felt from embroidery faded, each prick of the needle feeling like a stab of guilt and judgment. My home, which should have been a sanctuary, was now suffocating. But I couldn't let go of the one thing connecting me to my mother.
Anna, I want to get new golf clubs.
Mark was as insistent as ever. When I declined, he would always remind me of his background, trying to guilt me into giving in.
Anna, I could really use some help with the rent again this month.
Her calls were no longer a surprise. Silently, I would transfer the payment directly to her landlord. I wondered what Mark would do if he ever learned the truth about my support.
Oh, Mom, is that a new handbag? It's so stylish.
I looked up to see Gemma proudly showing off a designer handbag. How could she afford it if she was struggling to pay rent? It was painfully clear. My support was being wasted. Mark, noticing his mother's new bag, chimed in.
Mom's got the good stuff. Anna, you should treat me too.
I found myself questioning why I continued to enable this, trapped by a false sense of duty.
Hey Anna, let's do something special for your birthday this year. How about a trip? Just the two of us.
This unexpected suggestion made me look up, surprised. In our 3 years of marriage, we had never celebrated my birthday together. He would always say he couldn't afford it, or that I could treat myself with my own money. I felt a flicker of excitement, remembering how much I had wanted a getaway together.
This time I'll plan everything. It's your birthday after all.
For once, he seemed genuinely enthusiastic, even researching hotels and sightseeing spots.
How about somewhere nearby like Napa or Carmel?
I nodded quietly, watching him scroll through his phone. When he showed me a picture of a luxury hotel, my heart lifted just a bit. The elegant lobby, grand chandeliers, everything looked beautiful. When I agreed, Mark continued with renewed excitement. I felt touched, hopeful that he was making a genuine effort.
Actually, it might be better to book it under your name, for credibility.
His words gave me pause, but I brushed it off, eager for the chance to spend meaningful time together. As the trip date approached, Mark's behavior grew increasingly restless. He was glued to his phone, texting frequently and occasionally smiling to himself in a way that felt odd. Is everything okay, Mark?
Oh yeah, nothing, just stuff.
His vague answers felt strange, but I brushed it off. 3 days before the trip, Mark came home earlier than usual.
So there's something I wanted to talk to you about.
His tone made my heart sink slightly.
My mom found a restaurant nearby she really wants to try, so I thought it would be nice to invite her along.
Why? I barely whispered the question, feeling an uneasy weight settle in my chest.
Come on, Anna. She'd love it. It'll be family time, right?
Family time. It was clear that in Mark's mind, family meant his mother, his sister, and maybe me.
Oh, and my sister will be coming too.
He hesitated, his expression making it clear that I had never been the priority. What was supposed to be my birthday trip had somehow morphed into a family affair.
My sister's husband and she had a big argument, so she could use the break,
His words were sympathetic, but there was a rehearsed quality to his explanation. But this was supposed to be my birthday.
What's the problem? It's just family.
His tone became sharper, turning the blame on me.
So what, Anna? Are you really that against having them with us?
His gaze hardened, as if daring me to argue. I swallowed my response. Somehow, his challenge felt like another game he'd won. The morning of the trip, Gemma and Heather stood by the station, waiting as though they'd planned to join all along.
Anna, we're all set to go, right?
Her voice held that familiar taunting sweetness.
Isn't this just perfect? A family trip on your birthday.
Her words dripped with sarcasm, and I felt my last ounce of hope crumble. 3 years of marriage, and I sacrificed so much for what I thought would be meaningful family ties. Waiting quietly on the platform, I closed my eyes, feeling a faint breeze touch my cheek.
Oh, Mark, I'd love one of those nice lunches.
Her voice was piercing and intentionally loud. She looped her arm through Mark's, looking right past me as though I were invisible.
Sure, Mom. Anna, can you pay for it?
He held his hand out to me without even a glance, still focused on his mother and sister. All right. I handed over my wallet, feeling the weight of his disregard.
I'll have the shrimp stir-fry. Make it just like Mark's order. It's what he loves, after all.
She glanced at me with a self-satisfied look as she placed her order.
Same for me. Nothing like family all enjoying the same thing, huh?
The 3 of them grinned at each other, leaving me an outsider in what was supposed to be my special day. On the train, Mark sat between his mother and sister, with me relegated to a separate seat across the aisle.
So, Mark, last night was awful. My husband, well, you know how he is.
Her dramatic complaints filled the train car, drawing glances from nearby passengers. I sat quietly, feeling the weight of their voices and the pointed reminders of all the things I supposedly didn't understand.
Anna, without kids or a career, you wouldn't understand what I go through.
True, Anna's got it easy, doesn't she? They both laughed, while Mark just gave a small chuckle, like it was all a harmless joke. They kept at it, with the 2 of them taking turns jabbing at me and each other while Mark passively played along. By the time we reached the hotel, they had thoroughly shattered any illusion of a warm birthday. I waited quietly in the lobby as they checked in.
Hello, Mr. James. Your reservation includes 2 rooms.
Mark turned to me with a smug smile.
Oh, Anna, I only booked 2 rooms. Mom and I will share one and my sister has her own.
Where am I supposed to stay?
There isn't a room for you, but hey, the lobby has some comfy couches. Lucky you, right?
Gemma and Heather laughed openly, not even bothering to hide their satisfaction.
Look, on the bright side, Anna. Better here than outside in the cold like some stray dog.
Mark grabbed my wallet again, extracting a few bills.
Don't worry, Anna. We'll grab some drinks in your honor.
Without a second glance, he walked off with his mother and sister, leaving me standing alone in the lobby. As they left, I found myself gazing up at the chandelier, feeling a strange calm come over me. It was a turning point. I took out my phone, whispered a weak, "What a shame," and pretended to be in a predicament.
Is there anything we can help with, ma'am?
Actually, yes. I spoke to the owner in advance, and he assured me I'd be well accommodated. The front desk staff's demeanor changed instantly, recognizing the hotel owner's name.
Oh, we're terribly sorry, Miss James. Let me alert the manager immediately.
I watched them scramble to assist me, finally feeling a hint of satisfaction. They upgraded me to the presidential suite, arranged a private dinner, and treated me as if I were the only guest who mattered. By the time Mark and his family realized where I was already enjoying a gourmet meal, alone in quiet luxury. Mark sent panicked texts that I ignored, his growing frustration adding to my quiet triumph. For once, I enjoyed my birthday free from their scrutiny, knowing this was the beginning of my freedom. The next morning, I left the hotel as quietly as I had arrived, having settled everything on Mark's credit card. It was time to take my life back, leaving them to deal with their own pettiness, and leaving me with a renewed sense of self-respect. As I walked out of the hotel, the staff's polite smiles and sincere gestures made me feel more supported than my own family ever had. By the time I boarded my train back, I knew they'd be waking up, wondering where I was, only to face a rude awakening. I turned off my phone, not wanting to be disturbed by the frenzy I knew would be happening back at the hotel. Later that morning, in the hotel lobby, Mark and his family were in a panic.
This has to be a mistake. Just wait a minute.
Mark's face turned pale as the front desk explained the charges. The realization dawned on him that his card had maxed out.
What kind of woman would do this to her husband? She's just shameless. How could she leave us here with this bill?
The hotel staff calmly informed them they'd be allowed to settle the bill later if necessary, a courtesy thanks to my connections. But they had no idea how badly this would impact their social standing. When I returned home, the house was as silent as ever, but now I felt peaceful. I opened the curtains, letting in the fresh spring sunlight, and sat down with a deep breath of relief. An hour later, I heard the front door slam open, followed by Mark's voice, furious and demanding answers.
Anna, what the hell were you thinking?
His voice was followed by his mother's high-pitched anger and his sister's snide remarks, all aimed at shaming me. They continued, raising their voices as though trying to humiliate me into submission. I simply watched them, my expression calm and unreadable. Why don't we continue this discussion outside? The sudden suggestion seemed to catch them off guard. After all, you wouldn't want the neighbors to hear what's been going on, would you? They paused, realizing the implications. I walked them out, finally ready to confront everything they had hidden for so long. By the way, here's the truth about the support I've given your mother these past years. Mark's expression shifted as I explained how I had quietly covered his mother's rent for 3 years. Starting this month, that arrangement is over. His mother's face went pale, her earlier arrogance replaced by desperation.
But Anna, please, you can't just stop like this.
I can, and I already have. I informed his sister that her petty posts about me were well documented and now shared with her husband, who was already filing for divorce. One by one, they understood the weight of the choices they made and how their dependency on me had brought them to this point. For years, they had bonded over their disdain, but now, unable to face one another, they were truly alone. A few weeks later, Mark came by to collect the rest of his things. I wore a simple black dress and looked put together, knowing this was our last goodbye.
Can't we start over?
You spent years treating me like a monster wife, didn't you? Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I walked closer, my voice calm. There's no need for me to act like the villain anymore. This is the end. A few days later, I received a package. Inside, one of my cherished embroidery pieces was carefully wrapped, with a note from Mark's niece apologizing. It was a small but powerful reminder that kindness and understanding don't come from status or force, but from genuine connection. My embroidery classes began shortly after, and I poured myself into teaching, sharing what my mother had taught me, feeling that deep connection each time I worked. I had finally found my peace, not by forcing anyone to be family, but by building my own circle of support and joy, just as my mother would have wanted.